Is this it? Or is there another chapter?
Oh, I've wondered if I've plateaued.
You haven't plateaued.
No, but I always wonder,
yeah.
So where does it go from here? Like I'm on my second arena tour. Where does it go? I've done movies. I'm doing a TV show.
Imagine the electric buzz of a live SmackDown crowd turning into a stunned silence the moment a headline-shattering announcement blows out of Triple H's mic. On the night of November 21, 2025 in Denver's Ball Arena, the WWE Universe was shaken to its core. Cody Rhodes, the undisputed champion, was ruled out of competition after a brutal off-script assault that left him with a life-threatening cervical spine injury. In that same broadcast, Drew McIntyre, who was on storyline suspension, struck Rhodes inside his tour bus, an act that not only ripped through the Last Time Is Now tournament, but also reshaped the entire War Games landscape just days away. Today, we dive into the details of that night, the forensic breakdown of the attack, the medical realities of axial compression, and how Triple H's decision reverberates across WWE's booking, betting odds, and fan expectations. Get ready to dissect the moment that altered the future of one of wrestling's biggest names and the stakes that now loom over the upcoming War Games showdown. On the evening of Friday, November 21, 2025, the world of professional wrestling watched its universe shift on a single night. The live broadcast of SmackDown from Denver's Ball Arena, a venue already humming with anticipation for the upcoming Survivor Series War Games, became a stage for an event that would ripple through every storyline and every locker room. What began as a routine promotion for the Last Time Is Now tournament and a quiet build to the marquee War Games match turned into a calculated assault that rewrote the rules of engagement between the undisputed WWE champion, Cody Rhodes, and the insurgent faction known as The Vision. The focus of that night was a brutal, unsanctioned attack carried out by Drew McIntyre, a superstar who is currently serving a storyline suspension. The assault, delivered inside the champion's personal tour bus, has left Cody with severe medical consequences, specifically diagnosed as axial compression of the cervical spine. The shock of that night sent ripples across the industry, turning betting odds, altering strategic plans for the War Games showdown, and reshaping the narrative landscape of WWE in ways no one could have anticipated. The first wave of confusion at the start of the broadcast was the absence of the expected entrance for Cody Rhodes. The usual cues, a booming Kingdom blast from the PA system, the roar of the crowd, the pyrotechnics that punctuated his arrival, played out, but the arena stayed dark. The music cut through the silence, turning the expected celebration into an eerie, almost haunting soundtrack to a missing person scenario. In WWE's meticulously orchestrated world, a missed cue is a signal of disaster, a sign that something has gone terribly wrong behind the scenes. In the ring, Paul Heyman stood beside Logan Paul and the rest of The Vision, minus the suspended McIntyre. Heyman delivered a manifesto that declared his intention to slaughter 5 heroes at War Games, a chilling proclamation that underscored the ruthless ambition of the faction. The Usos, fresh from their reunion, stepped into the ring and interrupted, their defiance and fire lighting the arena. But the absence of Cody's entrance created an unsettling tension that resonated throughout the show. The Usos' presence offered a glimmer of hope, yet the looming threat of the Vision's brutality seemed inevitable. The reveal came with a handheld camera feed that cut to a backstage loading dock. The shaky footage, reminiscent of the body cam footage shown earlier that week, added an immediacy that the audience could not ignore. The camera focused on Cody's personal tour bus, a symbol of his status as the face of WWE and the mobile home of a man who had wrestled his way back to the top of the business. The door swung open, and there was Drew McIntyre, not in a competitive state, but in a role far more sinister. He emerged with a satisfied, almost sadistic grin, wiped his hands, and mocked the unseen carnage inside before fleeing the scene in an SUV that was waiting just outside. The footage confirmed that McIntyre had carried out the assault, and the violence was not contained to a backstage brawl. It had crossed the line into a calculated, premeditated attack inside a place that should have been safe. The incident has far-reaching consequences for the ongoing conflict between the undisputed WWE champion and the Vision. The attack on Cody has introduced a new layer of tension and urgency to the storyline. While the War Games match was already a focal point of the upcoming event, the injury to the champion adds a sense of vulnerability and desperation that will drive the narrative forward. In the weeks that followed, the WWE creative team had to reassess their approach. Should they proceed with Cody in the main event, or should they restructure the War Games match to accommodate the new reality of his injury? Betting odds shifted dramatically, reflecting the uncertainty surrounding whether Cody would be able to compete. And the storyline's focus turned from a simple clash of rival factions to a race against time, a struggle for survival on the battlefield of the wrestling ring. The broader context of the conflict involves the political and philosophical battlefield that has come to define WWE in late 2025. On one side stands The Vision, a superstable orchestrated by Paul Heyman. On the other stands a coalition of heroes, a fragile alliance that includes Cody Rhodes, CM Punk, Roman Reigns, the Usos, and other wrestlers who have been forced together by necessity rather than friendship. This coalition, known to fans as Team Rhodes or Team 2.0, unites bitter rivals under the banner of survival. The tension within the team...
I didn't even sign my release papers. I told them I was done on social media, which is, none of this works anymore. None of this flies anymore. I had to leave, and I've heard...
is palpable. Punk and Reigns have exchanged heated words backstage, and the question remains whether they can coexist inside the War Games cage or whether their egos will lead to their own destruction. The storylines surrounding the rise of Ilya Dragunov as a dominant United States champion, the return of AJ Lee, and the Last Time Is Now tournament involving John Cena's retirement tour all converge in this tumultuous period of WWE history. The Last Time Is Now tournament itself, which ran in the weeks leading up to the SmackDown broadcast, served as a catalyst for many of the storylines that had built up to the War Games match. The tournament featured a series of high-stakes matches, with the ultimate prize being a shot at the undisputed WWE Championship. As the tournament progressed, it was clear that the stakes were high, with each victory bringing a wrestler closer to the ultimate goal. The tournament's impact on the War Games match was significant. The match was already a focal point of the upcoming event, but the tournament's outcome added an extra layer of urgency and drama to the storyline. The body cam footage of the Raw brawl the week before the SmackDown broadcast added a gritty realism to the storyline that made it feel like a real-life conflict. The footage, which captured the chaos of a brawl that spilled out of the arena and into the streets, underscored the stakes of the conflict. The footage's raw, unfiltered nature made the storyline feel like a real conflict that had taken a toll on both the wrestlers and the audience. It was a reminder that the stakes in professional wrestling were higher than ever before, with the possibility of real injury and damage to a wrestler's career. The footage also underscored the importance of the tournament's outcome, which had a significant impact on the War Games match. The tournament's outcome was an essential part of the storyline, as it was the ultimate goal of the conflict. Ultimately, the attack on Cody Rhodes was a turning point in the WWE story, with the immediate aftermath reverberating across every storyline. The injury to the undisputed WWE champion has forced WWE to adapt its plans, and the fallout from the attack has added a new layer of urgency to the conflict between the factions. As the story continues to unfold, WWE will have to grapple with the fallout from the assault on Cody Rhodes and determine how to balance the need for storytelling with the safety of the performers. The conflict between the Vision and the coalition of heroes will remain a defining element of WWE's creative vision, and the stakes will only increase as the story moves forward. The injury to the champion has created a new sense of urgency and danger that will shape the story for the weeks to come, making it one of the most dramatic moments in the history of WWE. The scene inside the cramped bus, where the lights flickered like dying embers, became a tableau of menace and humiliation. Cody Rhodes was found hanging upside down, his legs tangled in the steering wheel, a twisted mockery of the Tree of Woehold, a wrestling maneuver that symbolized a descent into chaos. Blood gushed from a jagged cut on his forehead, the dark liquid pooling against the polished floor, a stark contrast to the pristine corporate image the champion had carried. The act of strapping the American Nightmare to a vehicle that should have been his sanctuary was not merely an attack. It was a declaration that no corner of his life could be protected, that nowhere was safe. By turning the familiar emblem of the American Nightmare upside down, the Vision's silent assassin inverted the very identity that had defined Rhodes' career, laying bare the vulnerability of the hero. The man behind the mask was the ninja of the Vision, an operant who, despite his indefinite suspension from SmackDown, had slipped through the cracks. The general manager's decision to suspend McIntyre came after a heated loss to Rhodes and Aleister Black, yet Paul Heyman's legal ingenuity had already found a loophole. War Games rules allowed team captains to enlist any talent from any brand, even if that talent was banned from a particular show. Thus, McIntyre's presence on Survivor Series was technically permissible, a silent guerrilla assault that the Authority could not quell. The television narrative shifted from a simple punishment to a cat-and-mouse game of creative law-bending, a narrative that kept fans guessing about whether the Vision would ultimately get the upper hand. The aftermath of the attack turned the story into a medical drama as well as a storyline. A medical update followed the bus incident, revealing a diagnosis of axial compression of the cervical spine, accompanied by a cervical strain and spasm. The diagnosis implied a severe vertical compression of the neck, likely from a piledriver or a dropped impact within the confined space of the vehicle. X-rays ruled out fractures, but the strain and spasms would cripple any attempt at high-impact maneuvers. The War Games set the stage for brutal suplexes from Lesnar and the deadly tsunami splash from Reed. Every move became a potential killer. Rhodes' neck, now a liability, would become a focal point for Team Vision's tactics, turning the war into a chess match where every lift and slam carried a threat of permanent injury. Amid these dark developments, the Last Time Is Now tournament carried on, a tournament that seemed almost sacrificial against the backdrop of Rhodes' injury. The tournament itself was no mere tribute. It was a direct path to a championship. As John Cena, still holding the Intercontinental title, was set to defend it at Survivor Series. The stakes were elevated, the narrative stakes higher. In the first round, Carmelo Hayes faced the colossal Bronson Reed. Reed's size and power dominated, but a sudden burst of chaos turned the tide. The Usos took out Logan Paul and Braun Breaker, creating a diversion that allowed a bloodied Cody Rhodes to bolt out of the back. Despite the cervical injury, Rhodes delivered a crossroads to Reed, a symbolic act of defiance. The interference forced Reed's defeat by countout, a victory that highlighted that the attack had not broken Rhodes' spirit. The moment forged a new bond between Hayes and Rhodes, a passing of the torch that may live on in the young star's future. The tournament also delivered surprises elsewhere. Penta, representing the Lucha Brothers, defeated Finn Balor, a shocking upset that suggested a shift away from Balor's main event focus. Meanwhile, LA Knight defeated a returning Zack Ryder, a move that added layers to the mid-card intrigue. Jey Uso advanced as well, proving the roster was dense with unexpected outcomes. These results, while not directly linked to the War Games or Rhodes' injury, painted a picture of a WWE world that was both unpredictable and deeply affected by the overarching storyline. When Triple H announced that Cody Rhodes would not compete in WWE following the brutal bus attack, the shock rippled through the ring. Triple H, the architect of the brand's creative vision, spoke with a tone that resonated with every veteran in the audience. The announcement did not simply mean a temporary layoff, it signified a permanent exit from in-ring competition, a decision that would alter the course of future storylines. The Vision's plans were suddenly left in a state of flux. With the primary antagonist gone from the main event scene, the balance of power shifted, leaving Team Vision's future strategy uncertain. Meanwhile, the remaining members of the Vision had to decide whether to keep the threat alive in the shadows or to seek redemption and closure. This development also cast a new light on War Games, where the women's division and the return of AJ had already begun to take shape. With Rhodes out of the picture, the focus would turn to the women's division's narrative, where AJ's return could serve as a catalyst for a fresh conflict. The absence of Rhodes' leadership in the main event scene opened space for other characters, such as Jey Uso and Carmelo Hayes, to step into the void. The War Games match would have to be recalibrated, perhaps focusing on the psychological warfare between the remnants of the Vision and the newly emerging factions. As fans watched, the emotion of the moment was palpable. The sense of loss was interlaced with hope. Rhodes' journey from an in-ring icon to a warrior who faced a crippling injury and ultimately chose to step away from the squared circle had become a story of resilience, sacrifice, and the harsh realities of the sport. The visuals of the Tree of Woe, the medical scans, the legal chess game, and the tournament's upsets were not isolated events. They were threads woven into a tapestry that reflected the complexities of a universe where characters live both in the arena and in the headlines. The future of WWE, now redefined by Triple H's announcement, would have to find new heroes and new villains, while honoring the legacy of a champion who, in his final moments inside the ring, had faced the ultimate test and emerged unbroken in spirit, if not in the ring. The night of November 21 had already carved its place in WWE history, but the ripple it set across the brand reached far beyond the main event spotlight. While the world watched the brutal bus attack and the subsequent withdrawal of Cody Rhodes from the squared circle, another arena crackled with its own drama, the women's division, a battleground that would shape the future of the women's War Games match. In the backstage haze, the whispers of a legacy return swirled, and the names of legends and rising stars intertwined like a new chapter in an age-old saga. AJ Lee, a figure who once ushered in a new era for women's wrestling, appeared on the stage in a moment that felt both nostalgic and revolutionary. She was not simply rejoining a team, she was reasserting a lineage that had been abruptly halted in 2015 when she retired early, leaving a void that had grown wider with each new champion who rose. Now, with Rhea Ripley, Io Sky, Charlotte Flair, and Alexa Bliss already assembled, AJ's presence added a fresh dynamic to a group already steeped in tension. Ripley and Flair, both multi-time champions, carried an undercurrent of rivalry that had simmered for years. Bliss, with her unpredictable flair, often served as the catalyst for conflict, or sometimes as the reluctant peacemaker. AJ's re-entry into the fold promised a question: would she smooth tensions or ignite a spark that would fracture the team further? The backstage segment that captured this friction was a masterclass in storytelling. Alexa Bliss stood in the middle, mediating between Ripley and Flair, her calm a counterpoint to the heat that simmered around her. In a moment that could have been played out in any wrestling narrative, Bliss offered a hand of unity. Yet the subtle gestures, A look to Ripley, a nod to Flair, hinted at an underlying distrust that would come to a head in the War Games cage. AJ, in her return, seemed to be the wildcard element that could shift the balance either way. Was she the quiet strategist who could navigate the chaos, or the rusted edge that might cost her team the match? The question hung heavy in the air. While the women's side was brewing, the secondary titles were gaining momentum. Chelsea Green's grand inauguration, celebration of her Women's United States Championship reign, elevated the prestige of the belt and offered a mid-card anchor amidst the looming chaos of War Games. In the men's arena, Ilya Dragunov, known as the Mad Dragon, showcased the relentless intensity of the United States Championship. His defense against J.D. McDonough of Judgment Day, a match described as a thrilling matchup, ended with Dragunov executing a devastating powerbomb followed by his signature H-bomb elbow drop. The victory not only reinforced Dragunov's image as an unstoppable force, but also set the U.S. title apart from the overbooked chaos that often defines the main event scene. The tag team division also felt the tremors of change. DIY, consisting of Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa, secured a hard-fought win over Fraxium. The finish, however, was shrouded in controversy. Candice LeRae, Gargano's wife, interfered, unmasking Axiom and creating a new layer of intrigue that suggested a darker turn for DIY. The implications of this interference hinted at a future where trust and betrayal might intersect in unexpected ways, perhaps culminating in a mask versus title feud that would further entangle the tag team landscape. Production choices this episode added another layer of realism to the narrative. The use of body cam footage and shaky cam techniques during the bus attack and subsequent commentary that repeatedly highlighted the axial compression diagnosis anchored the storyline in medical reality. This approach broke away from the polished veneer of traditional WWE production, giving fans a raw, unfiltered experience that mirrored the brutal nature of the injury itself. The portrayal of McIntyre as a modern stone-cold villain, devoid of any heroic veneer, amplified the sense that the threat was genuine, not merely theatrical. Within this context, the War Games match at Survivor Series was poised to become more than a contest. It would be a battleground for the fractured narrative threads. With Team Vision's advantage amplified by Cody's absence, the early phases would see a flurry of attacks aimed at destabilizing the wounded champion. Yet, the possibility of a cohesive double-team move by Reigns and Punk could symbolize a unity of babyfaces, a narrative arc where the collective could overcome a lone, injured hero. On the women's side, the dynamic of the Dream Team versus the heel squad of Becky Lynch, Nia Jax, Lash Legend, and the Kabuki Warriors, Asuka and Kairi Sane, promised a psychological war. Becky's heel turn added an emotional core to the match. Her past with AJ and her newfound ruthlessness would test the boundaries of loyalty and ambition. The broader storyline also hinted at future trajectories. While the War Games match itself was set to showcase raw physicality, the surrounding events, the women's title celebrations, Dragunov's relentless defense, DIY's controversial win, suggested that Survivor Series would be a pivot point. It was no longer only about the outcome of a match. It was about who would emerge as the new pillars of WWE, who would fill the vacuum left by a permanent departure, and how the brand would redefine its future without one of its most iconic figures. Thus, the November 21 episode was not a mere showcase of booking. It was a masterstroke that intertwined extreme violence, historic returns, and high-stakes title defenses into a narrative tapestry that could only be described as unmissable. Triple H's announcement that Cody Rhodes would no longer compete in WWE after the brutal injury did not merely alter the main event. It reshaped the entire brand, leaving a legacy of resilience and vulnerability that would resonate throughout Survivor Series and beyond. The WWE Universe, already turned towards San Diego, was not just waiting for a victory. It was waiting to see how the story would evolve in the wake of this profound loss. The weight of Triple H's announcement settled over the locker room like a dense fog, the silence punctuated only by the occasional hushed murmur of disbelief. "Cody Rhodes won't be stepping into the ring again," the authority figure had said, his voice devoid of the usual bravado that had once defined his persona. It wasn't a statement of fact, it was a declaration of fate. The room felt suddenly colder, as if the heat that had once surrounded Cody's charisma had been sucked away, replaced by the stark reality of a career abruptly halted. Cody's own eyes had lingered on the footage that had played the night before. The brutal bus attack, the shaky camera angles that captured the rawness of his injury, and the medical terminology, axial compression, that had been interwoven into the storyline to lend a veneer of authenticity. It was no mere gimmick. The medical realism had become a thread in the tapestry of his narrative, a way to connect the audience to the tangible pain of the sport. He had stared at that footage, a mix of triumph and terror flickering across his face, knowing that his body had become a testament to the sacrifices wrestlers make for their craft. The backstage reaction was an almost palpable storm. Some wrestlers exchanged worried glances, while others shifted uncomfortably, realizing the implications of Cody's absence. He had been a linchpin, a bridge between the veteran roster and the new wave of talent. His injury not only removed a key player from the ring, but also left a void in mentorship and narrative cohesion. Those who had shared the stage with him felt an instinctive tug, a sense that the balance of power within the company was shifting. The brand itself began to tremble on the edge of change. Without Cody, the hierarchy required a realignment. New leaders would step forward, faces would rise, and the dynamics of alliances would shift. This transition echoed the earlier disruptions caused by the controversial win over Fraxium and the subsequent interference by Candice LeRae. That incident had already blurred the lines between trust and betrayal, between hero and villain. With Cody out of the picture, the mantle of narrative leadership passed to those who had previously been cast in supporting roles.